Ethan arrived before sunrise because that was what he always did. The reception hall still smelled faintly of fresh paint and polished wood. Staff moved quietly between tables, checking lists, adjusting chairs, preparing for a celebration that had taken nearly 18 months to assemble. Ethan walked through it without expecting thanks. He only wanted to see everything finished. From the outside, it looked like a generous gift. Only he knew it had been built one quiet favor at a time. There had never been one enormous request, just a deposit that needed covering, a florist who required payment before ordering flowers, a caterer who couldn't hold the date without another installment, the photographer's balance, the musicians, the linens. Each conversation had ended the same way. Just this once. He had believed them every time. His younger cousin, Melissa, had called him her rock. Her mother insisted the family would never forget what he'd done. Even the groom had shaken his hand weeks earlier, promising they'd make him proud. No one had asked whether he wanted to carry the wedding. They had simply assumed he would. As guests slowly began arriving, Ethan noticed something that should have meant nothing. His name wasn't on the seating chart. He searched twice before convincing himself it was a printing mistake. Someone from the wedding party politely directed him toward the side entrance reserved for vendors. He smiled, corrected them, and walked inside anyway. Small things, easy to dismiss. Until they weren't. Melissa found him near an empty hallway behind the bridal suite. She looked beautiful, confident Bussy. He smiled first. I just wanted to wish you. She interrupted before he finished. Her expression wasn't angry, it was impatient. You don't belong here. The sentence landed with astonishing calm, no shouting, no insults, just certainty. As though she were explaining something obvious. She glanced toward the dressing room. This is for close family. For a second, Ethan thought she'd laughed. She hadn't. He remembered writing another check 3 weeks earlier because the florist had threatened to cancel. He remembered spending his vacation negotiating discounts with vendors. He remembered skipping his own plans because every emergency somehow became his responsibility. Closest family. Apparently, that definition ended where payment began. He nodded once. I understand. Nothing in his voice betrayed what had just broken. Melissa looked relieved that there wasn't going to be an argument. She disappeared back into the bridal suite without another word. Ethan stood alone for nearly a minute. Then he walked outside. The morning air felt strangely quiet. He opened the folder he'd carried for months. Every major contract listed one client, his name, not because he wanted control, because everyone else had asked him to handle it. He made the first call to the catering company. His voice remained steady. I need to withdraw authorization for today's service. The coordinator paused. As the contracting client? Yes, we'll email confirmation immediately. The second call went to the florist, the third to the rental company, then the musicians. Each conversation was remarkably ordinary, professional. Documented, no raised voices, no dramatic speeches. Only contractual reality. Several companies apologized for the situation before explaining the same thing. Without authorization from the legal client, or immediate replacement contracts and payment, they could not proceed. Ethan thanked each of them. When the final call ended, he sat on a bench across the street. For the first time in months, nobody was asking him to solve a problem. Inside the venue, the timeline quietly unraveled. The florist's truck never arrived. Kitchen staff waited for food deliveries that never came. Rental workers failed to unload tables scheduled for the outdoor reception. Confusion spread slowly because everyone assumed someone else knew what was happening. At first, there were whispered conversations, then hurried phone calls, then visible panic. The venue coordinator eventually gathered the immediate family in the lobby. Her voice remained calm despite the growing tension. "I need everyone's attention." The hallway became silent. She held several printed emails. Multiple contracted vendors have confirmed that today's services were canceled by the individual who legally booked them. Someone immediately protested. "There has to be a mistake." "There isn't," she continued carefully. "The contracts identify one client. Without new agreements and immediate payment, those vendors cannot legally provide service." The room changed. Not emotionally, practically. People reached for phones. Others argued over who could pay. Replacement vendors were contacted. Most were already committed elsewhere. Others required advance payment that couldn't be processed quickly enough. Time became the one thing nobody could purchase. The celebration they had imagined dissolved into hurried compromises. Simple food replaced a formal meal. Fresh flowers never appeared. Several guests quietly left after learning of the delays. No one could negotiate with a schedule that had already moved on. Across the street, Ethan watched people enter and leave the building. He felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. Months earlier, he might have rushed back inside, solved every problem, apologized for everyone else's choices, and somehow become responsible again. Today he remained seated, not because he wanted anyone to suffer, because dignity sometimes required refusing one more impossible rescue. Late that afternoon, he received a single text. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." He stared at the screen for several seconds before locking his phone without replying. The message revealed more than an apology could have. She hadn't expected consequences, only continued sacrifice. As evening settled over the nearly empty venue, Ethan stood and walked toward his car. The wedding would eventually become another family story. Some people would blame him. Others would quietly admit they understood. None of that mattered as much as the lesson he finally accepted. Generosity had never obligated anyone to love him, but neither did love require him to accept humiliation. He drove home with no celebration waiting for him. Only something far less dramatic, the unfamiliar peace of knowing that, for the first time in years, his kindness no longer came at the expense of his self-respect.